Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to our panel today. This is about the skills, industry in India and what's going on. My name is Mujtaba Wani. I'm a principal at GSV. I focus on India and global higher ed and upskilling. If to start, it'd be great if just each panelist can briefly introduce themselves and tell us about their business.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ganguly. I'm the founder of Antwak. As the name suggests, how ants walk. You must have seen them touching each other's antennas. So we are creating a Edtech platform for enterprises to train their employees from people who walk the same trail as theirs.
Hi, everybody. I'm Phalgun Kompalli, one of the co-founders of Upgrad. Basically, what we do at Upgrad is that we work with universities and their faculty very closely to help them with design, development, and then delivery of online programs. So we cover the full spectrum, starting from 3-month certification programs to degree programs to a full doctorate program. And right now, we are very strong in the areas of technology management, which go with skilling, but we're expanding into more areas to help people skill online.
Hi, my name is Mohan Lakhamraju. I'm the founder and CEO of Great Learning. And at Great Learning, we offer professional education, bootcamp, and degree programs, some of which are done in collaboration with universities and some which we do ourselves, both in India as well as in several other parts of the world. So we started out in India, now are fairly global in our footprint.
Hi, my name is Ashish. I'm the co-founder of Sunstone Eduversity. We basically one of the leading higher education provider in India. And we work primarily with the colleges and universities, work in the area of upskilling students. We operate in the next 90% segment, that's what we call it. We don't operate in the top 10% segment. And basically help students become employable, get into entry-level jobs. So that's primarily what we do.
And so the first question I wanted to ask was just a little bit of setting the context to help people understand what the typical skilling journey looks like for sort of an average Indian student. Whether, do they learn in college? Do they learn on the job? Maybe Phalgun or Mohan, if one of you want to start.
Sure. So the thing about India that I'm sure all of you already know is that it's very diverse. So there's no one path that everyone takes. But the typical path that happens is that people will go to mediocre college or a university where the quality of education is not very good. So which means that they will get a degree, but they wouldn't have actually learned any real world applicable skills. And then so they'll come out of that. Some of them, the enterprising ones, will pick things up on their own. They'll get a job. And then they will learn more on the job and actually become employable. But for the most part, people will not get a job and they will be underemployed, which means that they may have an engineering degree, but they'll be doing work that doesn't require you to be an engineer. Now, these people, over a period of time, and those are the folks that we are largely serving in actually developing skills for them by giving them high-quality learning experiences and actually making them employable. And then there's a very large segment who actually can't afford that either, in which case they remain underemployed for a long period of time. So that affordability problem is something that we are still looking at solving. So I would say that's the large mainstream, and of course there are long tails on either side.
And just to add to what Mohan mentioned, I think very similar our experiences that, and when we look at people, they complete an undergrad degree. Very few have strong outcomes. And the enterprising ones build out skill on their own, doing various courses and paying more attention and building their own skill. But most of them don't have strong outcomes. So they either end up with, again, a very mediocre job, or then a lot of people actually look at doing masters immediately after, either in India or abroad, and they do that. And then again, they reach the same junction point of, okay, but now what do I do? And then post that, they get a job and continue their career. That is what we are trying to change, where one is that the outcomes at all of these points need to be disproportionately better than what they are today. And second, not just in India, but globally, I think there is this thing of education is an event where you do your bachelor's and then your master's and then for the rest of your life you work. We want to change that to push and evangelize lifelong learning and be lifelong learning partners for these folks.
The one other thing that I want to add there is that even for folks that actually have a decent educational experience, and this applies a lot more in the developed countries, even there is a significant gap between what the academic institutions are offering and what the industry now wants. Just because of the change in the nature of work, the change in workplace demands, academic curricula haven't kept up, other than at the very top universities. Now that's a gap that we are looking at filling as well, because we just have the ability to keep up with the industry demands far faster than traditional academic settings, which are relatively slower to change.
And so there's clearly a layer of issues, right? And there's issues across sort of the pipeline, if you will. There's an issue in getting into a good university, and whether you're at a good university or an okay university, it's whether you can actually get skills there, whether you can get employed from there, and then when you get to the job, whether you actually are capable of doing that job, whether you can get a job that's actually, well-paying. So where do you all see is the real, what's the biggest issue, if you will, right? And you all are tackling it in different ways, right? Like Ashish is doing proper university education, Joy is doing enterprise only. I think Great Learning and Upgrad are doing the full stack. I mean, where is the biggest problem? What's the beachhead for the solution?
Maybe I'll start. So what we feel primarily the biggest problem is actually twofold. One is definitely there is a problem of affordability because of the segment that we are operating in. We don't operate in the top 10% segment. So below that, definitely there is a problem of affordability. Student in this segment even do not get a moratorium loan as well. So if they want to pursue some kind of professional education, they have to pay from their own pocket, or they have to start paying installments or loan installments from month one. That's one. And secondly, we also feel very strongly that, as Mohan also said, that there is a big divide in what these universities and institutions are teaching and what's basically a corporate is looking for. And that's where we sort of plug in, is that university can continue to teach what they are teaching and what is required by the regulation, but you can create a lot of programs which are on top of, let's say, what is required by regulation. So let's say if university has to teach operations, we can plug ourselves in and we can teach logistics, supply chain, warehousing, and similarly a lot of other things based on the domains. So that you get, as a student, you get everything within your university duration. So this is essentially what we feel are the two biggest issues.
The way I think about it is, just like any other supply chain, people's supply chain also depends on what is the kind of output you need. So for India, if you think about the last 2 decades or so, the biggest story has been information technology. And the reason why it was that is because the output of that industry was fed into a more global setup. And hence, they started to move up the value chain. Whereas in many other functions per se, or many other industries, they were all cost-based kind of players where their idea was, if you have given a job, just do it, go home, kind of an approach. So to me, this is not a supply problem. India has education inbuilt into our culture. We are not a supply problem. The problem is, who is going to be the next Narayan Murthy to get the next set of jobs in India? And where we stand today, we have 100 million new jobs coming to India in the form of sales, customer success, more of technology. It's like a full wave of things coming. I just did my Y Combinator, and I know so many of my batchmates are saying, can I set it up in India? Because jobs that were not being done remotely earlier, they're all now possible to do remotely, and a whole wave of it. So I think the most important problem for India now is a set of entrepreneurs who will get these jobs in India. Once you have those high-quality jobs, everything else will work. That's the biggest issue there.
Just if I may add to that, I think completely agree with the fact that higher education is always about upward mobility, right? There's a little bit of a small segment that does it for research, for excitement and curiosity and all of that, but mostly it's about upward mobility. Now for that, what role a higher education institution or a company can play is to, one, understand what the key trends are and be very agile in terms of adjusting because things change very fast. And based on that, I think the two biggest problems, if I were to attack today, I would attack are, one, give people a very realistic path towards that upward mobility, right? Just tell them that, okay, based on what we know, and we have done some work and you might not know, this is what we think is a realistic path for you in terms of your upward mobility journey. You cannot be an AI engineer at Tesla in 12 months from now, but you can 10 years from now, and this is what that path looks like, and that is something that we can give you. And second, once you, and it's tough, I'm not saying we have solved it or anybody can immediately, it's a tough one, but I think that's the key problem that if we solve for, unlocks a lot of value. One, create those paths and communicate those effectively, and then second, deliver on that value proposition that has been then created in terms of that path. What do we do to then deliver on that path and that outcome would be the two key problems that I would attack today to solve this problem at scale.
So you asked, what is the main problem, right? So my view on that, the reason why this situation exists and persists is that we just don't have enough good teachers. Okay, I think teaching in India, particularly both in school as well as higher education, has not been an aspirational role for entire generation of people. So all the folks who, let's say, are ambitious, they all went into IT, which has been a growth sector, telecommunications and others. And so there's been severe underinvestment in education, underinvestment in the human capital in the education sector. And if you don't have good teachers, you don't have good outcomes, right? Even today, the investment that is done, and it's largely been left to the state, and the state has only so much money to invest behind this. So the human capital in education in India is very poor, and that directly reflects in the educational outcomes that are there. So if we as edtech companies are able to do something, it's mainly because we are able to actually invest a lot more in the human capital along with technology to actually deliver these outcomes, which the state and the public institutions are not able to do.
Could we talk a little bit about measuring outcomes? So, of course, if you're doing an actual degree program, probably most people who are coming for a job, and you can measure when they graduate whether or not they get a job. But what about all the certificate students, the B2B training? How do you think about outcomes?
And I can start. Obviously, I think even for degree programs or any program, completion is one metric which we track, but that's just the beginning, right? In terms of, okay, now the person has completed this particular course. But let's say it's a data science course. Now, is that person actually a good data scientist who can be employed? Now, typically, given the space that we are in, we track student outcomes from the perspective of job outcomes. So we say that, look, when the student comes in, we have the profile, we understand student aspirations of why they're investing in this course, and internally we have this framework called TAP, T-A-P, which is either saying that, okay, this person wants a career transition, or this person, transition meaning wants to move from Infosys to Google, or this person does not need a transition, they need career acceleration in their same company where they are already in Infosys, but they want to be a team leader in Infosys, and that's the second kind of outcome we can deliver. And the third kind of outcome is this professional confidence. That's the one that's a little bit more fuzzy to define, but more professional confidence in the sense that I'm leading a team of 20 people as a marketing person, but I was never really confident of having a conversation because I don't understand digital marketing. Just a random example, but just building professional confidence. So that's what we track it against and say that how many people are we able to deliver either one of these three outcomes to 6 months post the completion of the program. Currently, it stands at about 80-85%. And it's not always professional confidence. Some people ask me that, is it all professional confidence? It's not. It's roughly 1/3 each. So we actually deliver 1/3 transitions, 1/3 acceleration in their careers, and the other 1/3 is typically, given the age profile, just professional confidence. So that's the second metric that I would track. The third interesting thing that we have just done, just again, a thing that I want to share is, for people who do this on campus, right? Let's say we do a master's in data science with Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, and there are about 100 students who do this on campus, and there are 5,000 students who do this online with us. Now, I had this random argument with the dean of the tech school there who said, look, I still think my 100 students on campus are better. I was like, okay, let's do a test. You set the test for your 100 people, and the same test will apply for all the 5,000 people, and they can do it. And it's exactly the same. If anything, the 5,000 students online have done slightly better. Right? So that's the third thing that now I want to institutionalize to break this stigma a little bit more. But that's how I think we would measure outcomes and keep pushing on that.
So in enterprise space, learning outcomes is a very interesting concept. If you think about corporate America spends roughly around 180 to $200 billion on corporate training every year. When I was back in the firm at McKinsey, a large part of my work was with capability building, and that's where I saw how broken the L&D is for even some of the biggest corporate America's big names. Now, in the last 24 months or so, you ask any HR, they call it's the job seeker market now, right? The best guys will always move out, and the theory of lemons apply, and the worst people will stay back with you. So for companies now, which is no longer essentially a building or anything else, it's almost directly proportional to the quality of people you have, training them has three major impacts. One, you improve their productivity. Two, you reduce your attrition. And three, you are able to promote a lot more people instead of doing lateral hires. All of these three are very quantifiable metrics, to the extent that when I did my last work at the firm on understanding the correlation between investments in capability building, you see that top 30% of shareholder returns company significantly overinvest in capability building. And this was even 4 years back. Now, that difference will be very, very high.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly add. So at Sunstone, our focus is definitely if the student wants some kind of outcome in terms of job, that's different. But what we track internally for a period of 2-3 years till the time student is with us is his skills on the social side, behavior side, and the cognitive side. And it's not just the assessment. We get a lot of data from classroom as well on the student. So it's like our Sunstone Learning Index, which we create for every student. And then every 3 months, that learning index is updated for students so that we can track in real time how a student is performing, which doesn't have to be linked to the placements every time.
So when folks come to us, career advancement is almost always the objective. Nobody's coming for the love of learning. I mean, there may be like a handful of people, but we have to really search hard for them. So it's all about careers. And so for the younger folks, it's all about getting a better job because, as I said, most of them are underemployed. So they're looking for a better job, a higher paying job. Better job means higher paying job, right? Very, very clear. Let's, it's not about, it's basically about money. So for younger people, that's what we deliver. And so we have a massive career assistance program, probably much bigger than what a typical university would have. And so, probably the biggest in India. And that delivers outcomes on a regular basis. For the folks that are older, let's say 30 years and above, the outcomes are more like what Phalgun was talking about. So some of them want to change roles within their organizations, move from jobs that may be hitting some kind of dead end and go into areas that are more aspirational where there's more growth, or they're looking at building their own capabilities to become more well-rounded, to actually grow into leadership positions and so forth. So that's for the older folks, and for the younger folks, it's all about switching to a better job. So now we internally measure all kinds of different aspects, like for example, the performance on score on various assessments, the amount, the completion rate, and and the how much they're able to keep up with the schedule. So we measure a lot of different things, but for the learners, this is what they care about.
If we could unpack a little bit the scalability of outcomes, right? A lot of people and a lot of companies are trying to place people, right, from Infosys to Google, as Phalgun said. How many people can we place into jobs at Amazon and Google versus Cognizant, Wipro, in sales roles, right? Where's really the depth of market? Where can you send the 100 million students in the next 5 years to get good jobs?
Sorry, I'll let other people answer, but just to clarify, I have students who've gone from Google to Infosys as well, right? So it doesn't work just one way. And they're really happy. They've got a career acceleration, and it works both ways. So wherever people find more joy and more money, as Mohan said. So.
If we are in a position to actually place 100 million people, I would be very happy. So would love to be in that position. See, So at least in the environment we are in today, it's actually constrained by the number of skilled people. You know, so the amount of demand for skilled manpower is so high right now, partly driven by the huge demand for digitization that's there around the world based on COVID. Every industry wants to digitize, and that's creating the need for a lot of jobs in the digital economy. There's just not enough people that have that. So right now, at least, jobs are not the issue. It's actually people qualified for those jobs. On our platform, right now, we have 200,000 positions to fill. Okay, so, you know, and there's just not enough qualified people. We are not able to create that many qualified people yet. There's enough jobs. But will that always be the case? No, that won't always be the case. Today's environment is like that. And at some point, we'll have to get to a equilibrium.
Yeah. So I'll just add one thing on that. See, the number of jobs in last 2 years, all of us know that India has hired like anything, and India probably has never hired like this in last 10, 15 years. And the demand for jobs and the skills continue to like remain very, very up and vibrant. But the big problem that we see is that the jobs which pay let's say more than 6 lakh or 7 lakh rupees per annum, so around $8,000 to $9,000, that's only 10% of the jobs. That's only the top 10% of the jobs. The remaining 90% of the jobs are still in the range of around 25,000 rupees to 50,000 rupees. So that's that's where you also have to set the expectation right with the student, that when you're starting for the fresher level segment, this is the kind of job that you will start with. And this is actually, I'm just linking to the question that you asked, that how many jobs at Google or Amazon, or how many jobs at Cognizant. So definitely, yes, what you mean is that Cognizant is more lesser paying, entry level, mass hiring jobs. So they are much more in number as compared to probably the jobs that you will find at entry level in Google or Amazon.
I have a bit of a nerdy way of thinking about this. And I think this is the right audience for that. One way to model this is using prospect theory. Okay. Some of you who follow behavioral economics would know this very well, that human beings actually overvalue losses as against gains. That's prospect theory, right? Now, essentially what Mustafa is asking, that if so many people need to do education, why is so many people not investing it? And the answer to that is prospect theory. Because if you think about major education investment, it happens at the two extreme ends. It's parents and companies. Why? Because for both of them, it's a loss aversion problem. Doesn't matter if you're a multi-millionaire parent, if your kids are not doing well in education, you're going to get a lot of flack in society. Lot. And there's no way to escape that. Similarly, for companies, it doesn't matter whether you are doing well now, but if you're really falling short of capabilities, today or tomorrow you are going to have a Kodak moment, right? That's the problem, reason why both this extreme end, who are working on loss aversions, add a lot more money to this, versus the ones who are thinking that I can move from point A to point B, which is always going to be a market, but that is, in prospect theory, is about people who are looking for gains, right? And the extreme ends will always be more scalable than this end. And there is a science behind that. Now, in that regard, and that's why it brings back to the idea that as the corporate India continues to have this ride, and some of you who are following geopolitical economics and all of that, right, understands that today there are only two people supply chain left. There is a English-speaking people supply chain, and then there is a Chinese people supply chain. In the English-speaking people supply chain, given what's happening in Eastern Europe and all of that, outside America and UK, India is the only major English-speaking people supply chain left now, and who has already, and education is something, you cannot have a 20-year-old kid born tomorrow, right? So you have a stock and flow problem. The stock is what exists, and you need to work with that stock, right? And hence, India already has that stock. We have 800 million people who are below 30 years of age, right? Hence, some of the jobs are going to go there. Some of the Indians are going to go abroad and make those careers in services industries especially. And hence, personally, I feel that a lot more investment will come in a very scalable way from people for whom this is a loss of not investing there. And that loss doesn't necessarily mean that you need to invest for moving from $10,000 to $20,000. That loss happens even if somebody is being paid $5,000. Of course, the amount of investment in that education will be far lower. But at all levels, not investing is a loss. And if edtech companies can come up with solutions at those levels to minimize the losses that companies make, they will definitely be very scalable outcomes.
So we're talking a little bit about investing. If we could cover the affordability question, right? The role of ISAs, of EMIs, right? I think you all have done a mix of models. Some people are paying cash out of pocket. In the US, ISAs, have not done terribly well. EMIs, consumer lending, if you will, for education is also quite problematic here. What have you all observed? What are your students doing, and where do you think it's going to go?
I think 4 or 5 years back, in the first couple of years at Upgrad, we said students are going to pay upfront, and if they need a loan, they'll figure it out on their own, right? Which worked for the most part. Then after 2 to 3 years, we said, okay, as we are growing and we are trying to scale this, the way to gain penetration would be to give financial options to students in terms of integrating with a loan partner, in terms of we didn't do ISAs, but a different model, and trying to see if that expands the market. After 7 years, very honestly, I don't know how much difference it's made, right? I think right now 50% students do take a loan, but what would they have done if that option didn't exist? I am actually not very sure, right? The second thing in my observation in education has always been that education is an investment, and people are looking at a return on investment. So today when I say that this course that Upgrad is offering costs $3,000 and somebody says it's expensive, if I give that same student the option to go to Harvard and do their MBA to spend $200,000, they would take that option, right? So basically, when the student is saying it is expensive, at least the way I would read it for the most part, I understand that there are extreme scenarios that, look, when you don't have it, it's a different problem. But for the most part, it's about when somebody is saying it's expensive in education, I just take it as you have not given him a reason to believe in the ROI, right? And what can you do to do that is more important to me than bringing the price down.
So I think for the segment that we have historically catered to, I think the ROI equation is very, very clear. Okay, they may pay $3,000, but they recover that very, very quickly in terms of the career progression that they get. So this thing that it is expensive, we actually don't pay attention to that, right? We just say that what is the cost of not doing it, right? So you don't learn, you don't upskill, and this is what's going to happen over the next 5 years, right? Then you evaluate both of these outcomes. Having said that, there is a very large percentage of the population in India that cannot afford $3,000 even, in the sense that they don't have savings, they don't have enough of an income to actually borrow against that income, and they don't have anybody who can be a guarantor for them to get a loan. So there's just like no options whatsoever. So that problem we still haven't solved, right? How to provide them quality education which has a certain minimum cost, right? So we would love to solve that problem. We still haven't figured out a viable model to solve that problem. So what we do instead is to actually have a lot of courses for free. But when we do courses for free, there's only so much of all of the additional value that we offer that results in outcomes that we can offer. And without those, really, the outcomes don't happen as well as we'd like to. So that problem we still haven't solved. And I don't have good answers on how to solve that. Ideally, the solution should be that there should be some kind of non-recourse financing that doesn't require guarantors, that that will be dependent purely on the learner's ability to repay back. And what we are hoping is that as we create enough evidence of that, as there is enough track record of that, just somebody doing a program at Great Learning is viewed as being credit-worthy enough that our brand becomes strong enough that people will finance just because of our brand, right? We are hoping, and at an affordable price, right? So then a lot more people can access it. So something we have to figure that out.
Let me add to that. I think one of the things, again, if you look at where it has been solved in India before is, again, IT services firms, right? Their 70-80% of revenue is time and material. They are basically large universities. They are the largest Edtech companies, maybe not tech, but definitely education companies of the world, whether it's Infosys, TCS. They're large universities, by and large. And the reason why they work is precisely the point that was made, that the investment can be made by them because they know that they are able to amortize that investment in terms of the time and material. And that's why, to the earlier point I was making, that the next 100 million people who are going to be employed in India, a lot of that is the next Narayan Murthy who makes an investment on them and places them and gets a return back. Putting that onus on people to move up, I fully agree with him, is always going to be challenging.
Yeah. So for us, that's a big area because of the segment that we operate in. The good thing with us is that the price point is already established. The segment which we operate in, the price point of MBA, BBA, BCA program, it's pretty much established. But there is a large segment of students who can't afford that. So let's say if the price point is $5,000 for a full-time BCA program, there's a large segment of students who are not able to afford that. And that's where we come in, whether we work with financing partners or we finance that ourselves. So the programs like pay after placement, programs like pay after graduation, or programs like giving some FLDG to the financing partners, as Mohan was talking about, that if it's a Sunstone student, I am willing to take risk on that. You don't have to worry about it. Why don't you just go ahead and give loan to that student? So these are some kind of creative ways of figuring out how do you solve for the affordability. If as Sunstone we believe that this student is good enough and will be able to whatever investment Sunstone is doing in the student, we'll be able to recoup it back.
What's the role of the regulators here, right? For sure on affordability, of course, there's a lot of noise about EMIs and advertising and university partnerships and new regulations on a monthly basis, but they could also be very helpful, of course, right? And the opening up of online degrees, the walking back of regulations there could, open up the possibility to do online degrees for $3,000-4,000, which I think some of you are already doing. What do you all think is going to happen? Have they been more helpful or more difficult?
Again, I can start, but I think the regulation is moving in the right direction in India. Obviously, as a regulator, I think your only job is to one, increase access and protect consumer interest or student interest, right? And there are various ways to do it. And I think the regulator is doing a fine job. The only place, and it's moving in the right direction in terms of making it more inclusive, making it more accessible, making it more affordable, and giving more universities and students the opportunity to do something digital and online. If there was something, and this is something I said to the regulators, is that if there is one thing that I would want is more clarity and consistency, so that there is no confusion in the consumer's mind or in the minds of people who are trying to build the ecosystem. Right? So those are the things that I think should improve a little bit, but otherwise I think directionally it's moving in the right direction. There are a lot more universities today in India than 7 years back who are prepared to do online. The acceptance of online in the minds of students, parents, universities, everything has gone up, partly because of COVID, but partly because of how the regulators have reacted to it. More clarity and more consistency is what is needed.
Yeah. And just to add on to what Phalgun is saying, that all of us who are working with the universities, our heart is at the right place. Our intentions are very clear, that we don't want to be on the wrong side of regulation. We want to work with universities and build ecosystem where we can create a better learning outcomes, better employability for students. So, and that's what I agree with Phalgun, is that now at least the regulator has woken up to it and they're moving in the right direction, where they're coming up and defining sort of lot of things preemptively rather than taking a lot of reactive measures. So that's the good thing, and once we have absolute clarity that, okay, this is allowed, this is not allowed, we will restrict ourselves to probably what is allowed.
So a big shift that we've seen this year in 2022 is the regulators actually clarifying what can be done. as opposed to always just saying what cannot be done. They never actually would be clear about what can be done. Right? That's a big change that has happened this year, where they're coming out and saying what can be done, which is actually a big, big relief, because in some sense it actually legitimizes everything about online degrees, about universities working with Edtech companies, technology platforms, all of those. And then they're also saying that online degrees are on par with traditional degrees. Right? So when a regulator makes statements like that, it actually adds a lot of credibility to those and gives comfort in the minds of all the stakeholders, whether it is students, it's faculty, corporations, recruiters, all of those folks. So those are all very welcome steps, I think, that they're taking. And I think it's coming from a point of view, that a realization within the government and within the regulators that if you have to achieve the goals of the new education policy, you don't have a choice but to do these things. I think that realization is setting in, so I think they're definitely going in the right direction. But to your point, I just wish that they're consistent and then they don't overreact each time there is some issue that somebody raises. Right? So if they can keep politics out of it and just stay the course, that's very good for the country.
Only if regulators were capable of keeping politics out of it in any country.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here, right? What happened here was there were certainly bad actors in for-profit online higher ed. And in response to that, the regulators basically decimated the entire sector, even though much of it was quite effective and beneficial to the student. But we have a few minutes left just to end on a positive note. It would be great if everyone could just maybe talk about what you're excited about, what you're looking forward to, where this is going to go.
Yeah, I can go ahead. So, as I mentioned, as online education, particularly online degrees, become credible and legitimate, and all stakeholders recognize that, I think it, for the first time, opens the possibility that literally millions of people can have access to quality education. So that whole teacher problem that I talked about, right, that actually can be solved through a combination of technology and the few good teachers that are there. And so we can actually see in 5 years, 10 years, I don't know how long it's going to take, but millions of people having good learning outcomes, which was never the case. And that's kind of what motivates all of us, what brought us into this space to actually make that happen. And I can see that happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think for me, a couple of things. First is similar to what Mohan mentioned. Before Upgrad, I was a consultant, so I made a lot of slides. So one of those slides was that...
That's like half of you guys.
Yeah. So I made a lot of these presentations, and I think there were two things because of which Upgrad started, actually. My co-founder, Mayank, was also with me at Parthenon, and 2 slides started Upgrad. The first one was that we said, look, globally, higher education is broken, and it's based on 3 pillars: access, affordability, and quality. All 3 are broken, and online technically can solve for all 3 of those. Right? So that I won't spend too much time because we've spoken a lot about that. The second slide was about if India, because we're thinking India then, and now we've expanded, but if you're thinking about India, and just think of achieving our GDP per capita goals. Let's say it's at $2,500 today, and if you want to get to $7,500. The GDP per capita of a country is directly correlated to their gross enrollment ratio. And this is something that we showed everybody, saying that if you want your country to grow, you need to invest in education, you need to skill them because people can be more productive, add more to the economy, and it keeps growing. Right? And we said, look, for India, if we have to meet next decade or 20-year targets, our GR has to grow from 27%, 28% to 60%. And for that to happen in the next couple of decades, trillions of dollars in cash has to go in investment if you want to build physical infrastructure, and we know that's not happening. Right? And that's where online is very important to solve for that problem. And these are the 2 slides because of which Upgrad started. But I think what I am most excited about, I think right now we are at the cusp of making that happen with the regulation opening up, where now online degrees are possible in India, where of a cohort of 120 million people, roughly 40 million people are enrolled in higher education with basically very poor outcomes. 80 million people don't even enroll in higher education because they don't have a value proposition that works for them. So what we can do with the regulations opening up, with universities offering online and providing these outcomes, I think is one thing which I'm really excited about over the next decade. The second thing that I'm excited about is international student transfer. And I think for the longest time, it's been restricted to a very privileged top tier class. But I think what we are now doing with the possibilities of that being blended in various formats is that the cost of transnational education can significantly go down. And that's again something that we see tremendous growth in. That's really exciting to open up opportunities for people.
So I'll just go ahead. So our sort of thesis is slightly different here. And we believe that college per se doesn't serve the need of only education. It serves the need of your peer groups, your networks. You create your life there. So it's a life stage that you have, which is a college. You move out of your parents' roof, you become independent. And so that's the reason that colleges probably will remain forever. And on the supply side also, we know that as a country, we are hugely oversupply country. So infrastructure is already built out. There are lakhs and millions of seats available, but there are no students who actually go and attend those colleges. So we believe that a hybrid kind of a program which works both online and offline probably should be sort of the future is what we are looking at. We're in sort of a mix of hybrid, mix of online and offline both, and where you can have the best of teachers, best of the faculties can teach online, and student can continue to be in an offline campus where they can continue to leverage their physical communities, networking opportunities, and live their life. So this is directionally how we are approaching, and that's how we think about education will evolve in sort of next 3 to 4 years.
For me, it's quite simple. As I said, 100 million people, $10,000 rough salaries will be for knowledge workers in India. That's $1 trillion on the table. And it's quite clear in my mind, just like what we had in the last decade or so, with the wave one of IT, which is much smaller than this. This $1 trillion of salaries of knowledge workers in India is going to get a significant investment in their training and upskilling. And we are going to be at the heart of the next generation of people's supply chain. I mean, there is no other math that works otherwise. So that's what keeps me excited.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.